Hello, good night to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Real Talk. Of course, Real Talk happens every Monday from 8 p.m. until 9 p.m. And tonight it is the 17th day in the month of November, and we are delighted to be with you once again discussing the issues of national importance, discussing the issues that matter to all of us here in Dominica. So let me just say a very special welcome to those of you that are joining us right now. It is always good to be with you. We are always delighted that we can be part of that discussion. What we try to do on Real Talk is to just, discuss in a very informal, very relaxed type of way the issues that confront us here in Dominica, the political issues, mainly political issues, some of the social issues, and just bring out the information that we believe that you should know, especially for the voters of Dominica. Our plan is to give you as much information as possible with respect to what the United Workers Party Team Dominica is focused on, the areas that we are looking to improve, the areas that we are looking to work on. And so it's a very exciting time, as we focus on some of the pressing issues that confront us here in Dominica. And so we are really thankful to have all of you from across the globe, not only here in Dominica, but from across the globe. Thank you for tuning in every Monday at this time and just been part of the conversation. Of course, you can put your comments in the comments line and let us just interact. The whole idea is to have this very laid back, informal interaction with you, giving you information about what we are up to, but also wanting to hear from you some of the ideas that you have, some of the areas that you want to see focused on, and just to hear more from us as a party in terms of what we're doing, what our plans are. The 10 pillars, for example, is another good area that we have been trying to bring to your attention, because we believe that this country, Dominica, is yet to see its best days, and that its better days are ahead of it. And so we are planning for that. We are planning for when we assume the role of government in this country. We are planning for a time when we'll be able to improve our agriculture sector. We'll be able to bring some sense to our manufacturing, to our tourism product, to our transportation sector, all of those different areas that we believe we can move and tweak and provide resources for, that will allow those sectors of our economy to create jobs, to create opportunities, in particular for our young people. So that's what we're all about. We're all about opportunities. We're not there to give mépris. We are not there to necessarily just shout people down for shouting down sick, but we are here to offer you something different, to offer you, in terms of what we believe as a United Workers Party Team Dominica, we can offer to the Dominican public. We want you to be very clear in your minds. When you go to the polls, you know exactly what it is that we are offering. And that's what Real Talk is all about. It's about bringing to you our ideas, our plans, some of our strategies that we have to develop this country, to bring hope to the people, to create wealth, just have it such that Dominican public can create opportunities, that the Dominican public can have better opportunities, that we can create wealth, for our country. So I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Unfortunately, my co-host is not able to make it because of some difficulties connecting. So I'll be all with you tonight. We'll have the entire hour to ourselves, but lots of important information, and I would certainly love to hear from you. I would certainly like to hear. This is a live interaction, so you can always, hook me up on the comments. I'll be able to look out for those and be able to respond in real time. So it's a great night. It's certainly something that I'm always looking forward to doing it for you on a Monday night. Of course, if you're wondering, my name is Dr. Thompson Fontaine. I am the political leader of the United Workers Party Team Dominica, and we're certainly poised, as I said, to take over the reins of government in this country. It's not without its challenges. It's not without its, tremendous challenges. But I think we're well up to those challenges, challenges from without and within, but we are certainly well up to it. And we will be able to, I believe, at the end of the day, offer that hope to the people of Dominica, offer a difference, in terms of building a country and having the shared prosperity, ensuring that all of us rise together. And that takes me to my first point of conversation tonight. I've decided to focus on three areas. One of those I want to talk to you now about is, as we talk about opportunities, is to talk something about the social ills that faces our country. 2 weekends ago, I spent some time with our proposed candidate in the Rose of South constituency. We spent some time there in the Silver Lake area. Our proposed candidate, had been there a few times before, but I went there for the first time with our proposed candidate, and I met some very interesting people. I met a number of young people there in the Silver Lake community. I mean, I was stunned because I have some kind of history, if you like, with the Silver Lake community, in the sense that during the 2014 election, which I contested for the Grand Forks constituency, Joshua Francis was the candidate for the Rose of South constituency, and we spent some significant time there with the people of Silver Lake. But even then, coming back 10 years later, the place, I can't even recognize the place. The longhouse is no longer there because of Hurricane Maria. They built in some apartments and so on for the people there, and it's different. But what was most striking to me in the Silver Lake community was the fact that you had so many young people. I mean, just scores and scores of young boys and young girls in that community. And it is a ballooning community. I mean, the population in 2025 compared to what it was in 2014 must have been, I just made a rough estimate based on the number of persons I saw. I'm guessing it's at least 3 times what it was 10 years ago. So that's a rapidly growing community there. Just less than half a mile from outside of Roseau. And, it pains in a lot of ways, in terms of what they have been going through in that community. Several of the young men there have been murdered. The most recent happened just this past week there on Thursday. And it was very, very sad to actually see that, because it's not the first time. We've had at least, I'm told, at least six murders of Silver Lake constituents there, and this is extremely alarming. This is extremely, extremely alarming, and that's why I wanted to talk about this tonight, because in a way it kind of hit home. Because although I did not meet this gentleman who got shot, that was a few days before, and I was there, but I did meet his mom and I did meet his brother, and we had an extended conversation, and so I went back right after the shooting. In fact, the same morning of the shooting, as soon as I heard about it, I went up to the Silver Lake area to just kind of show my support for the people and express our solidarity with them, because it's just extremely painful, the senselessness of the killings, the fact that these are young people, the very lifeblood of our society, being killed, being attacked. And it seems like this is a never-ending cycle of revenge and killings and so on. And we absolutely have to put a stop to this, And so in talking to the people of Silver Lake, you see a people that in a way, I mean, promises have been made to them, unfulfilled promises by this government. The whole community is not really conducive to healthy living. You have a big community like that, and there is no playing field for the young people. Absolutely no place to play. The street, not even a speed bump they would put in front of the street. Then you have children going up and down, running up, across there. It's a major part, but you would think that by now there would have been in place. There must be a speed bump to slow down the traffic, because there are loads and loads of kids in that area But you get the sense that they have received the short end of the stick. These are most of the families there are coming from depraved homes, basically in poverty. We have a situation where you have, two families living in one house, and I mean, I could not believe it. And I was told, yeah, there are two different separate families. One family lives in the drawing room, the other one lives in the bedroom. And then I visited one home where this individual, she showed me a home, and I could not believe. She was like, yeah, it's a one bedroom house. Seven of us sleep in this one bedroom house, and she showed me where she sleeps, just at the entrance of the door. But the condition of that building, I'm like, people should not have to live in those conditions. It is absolutely deplorable. And you must think that we can do better by people like that who are in need, and who really need the support. So when you think of a country like Dominica that has devoted, or that has been able to get literally billions of dollars of revenue generated by this country of Dominica, and yet you have our people living in those kinds of conditions. And on top of that, you add the violence, you add the killings, you add the deaths. These are human beings. These are people with feelings. These are people that cry and hurt and feel pain. And it is extremely appalling to me, and very, very sad, that this is the conditions that we witness in Silver Lake. And so I thought I wanted to share this. I'm even hesitant to describe what I've seen. It is so painful. It's not about bringing anybody down. It's not about, but it's just to bring some, if you like, some kind of focus on what is going on there in our own country, and to let people know that there were Dominicans that are hurting, and I spoke to some of these young people, and one says, our rooms are leaking, you know, we have to put buckets when it rains, and because of the way the apartments have been built, really, really poorly constructed, you have water coming from above to those below, a complete mess, and you have people living in those conditions, and so I believe we can do better. Quite frankly, I believe we can do better. I started talking about the billions of dollars that our country has been able to get, and we I believe in Dominica. We have been fooled by this government into believing that this prime minister in particular has such a love, a genuine care for our elderly and those less fortunate. But I would like you to go to villages, to places like that, go to those kind of communities and see the reality of what is on the ground. And you will understand that this is just a show, that this whole thing about caring for the poor and is just about vote buying, and so it is extremely, extremely painful. The violence is one thing, but the physical living conditions under which people operate, it is just mind-boggling. And then entering this home and seeing for myself and seeing the condition of the home, unbelievable, unbelievable. And I'm told that this is the average, the typical type of situation for the community. And so it's extremely sad, when you think about it and when you've had a chance to witness it firsthand. And as I said, the pain of this community losing yet another of the young men, and the fact that we had a conversation, because as we arrived on the scene there, we had several persons. That was the weekend before the shooting. We had several persons hearing that we're wrong. Word spreads very, very quickly, and very soon we had quite a large number of people around that we were able to speak to. And I think that at one point we must have reached up to 20 or so young people just around us. We're just discussing, talking about, finding out from the different individuals who they were, what they were doing, and so on. And then I asked the question, I asked, how many of you there are working? And I think there were two individuals that raised their hands out of those 20 young people that were gathered there this night, and there were another probably 4 or 5 that were at school. but the vast majority were just on the block, no opportunities, no future for them in this country. And that's what we have. That is the situation in this country. And I believe that Silver Lake is a reflection of a number of communities across Dominica: rising poverty, rising youth unemployment, an overall neglect by this government, persons living in squalor, in conditions that will really turn your skin when you think of our people. And I'm like, how did 7 people in just a confined space? And it's sad. It is. And so, we must do better. We must do better, given the resources that this country have been able to secure. You must think that the needs of those that are truly in need can be better met. And when you think of the opulence of our leader, the prime minister, living in opulence, living, just in that's the envy of persons from very rich countries, and to see where our people are. And then the same prime minister is telling us that he wants to remain in office forever. And of course, that begs the question why it is that even after all of those years where you failed to meet the needs of the people, where you failed to really prove yourself as a statesman in terms of being able to contribute meaningfully to our country's development, why does you still want to impose yourself on the people? And that has implications, of course, for the confirmation process, the whole electoral process, which I will address a little later. But I wanted to spend a little more time just on this issue of Silver Lake, and I will take a chance to just look at some of your comments. I know that many of you are putting comments, and so a lot of useful comments, and I'm going to take some of them now. I think as we are doing this, so let me take some of these comments there that we can read, because it's very important. I want to deal with that issue, and then I can move on to the other topic of the minimum wage that has focused lately, that has been given some light lately. I want to talk about that. But let me just take this comment there from Cecil, who says, "Brother, I know you're open and earnest, and you have my full support, and I know you mean well for a beautiful country, Dominica. But bro, labor wrongs are the Dominican version of MAGA. They know the wrongs, they see the wrongs, but they continue to follow as a cult. So very sad. Still, I'm with you, because like Lennox, you're doing well for all my Dominican people." Thank you very much for that, Cecil. Indeed, we really do our best. We really try absolutely to get the message out, to reach out and to do what we can. Dominica is a beautiful country that just needs our support. This government has not done good by the people of Dominica under any circumstance. And the fact that even people in those conditions, the fact that they can continue to support this government says a lot. It says a lot. And so you're absolutely right about that. And we need to really do this. All right. And then Chiquito says, "Keep working with the people. You will succeed." Thank you very much, Chiquito. Indeed, I can tell you it's been a real honor for me personally to interact with these individuals, and then just to feel their pain and their grief. And so and it was just through coincidence that that I met the relatives of this individual who died, and I was able to go back and really spend time and express sympathies and so on with them. So it is indeed quite concerning that the situation is on the ground. Yes. And then all right, so let me see. I'm trying to get some more comments to share with you. All right, and then this individual, Greg, says, "Ghetto youths, it's time to wake up And I think in a way, I think that's a very useful comment here, because what we're saying is that the young people in particular, and that is where that's where my heart is. How do we rescue? How do we ensure that our young people do not have to continue to go through what they're going through in Dominica? How do we create opportunities for young people? How do we create jobs that our young people can find work, and they can find useful things to do and not be engaged in this endless cycle of violence and sometimes drug dealing and so on? We need to find a way to be able to do this. And so, and then that is what it is. We need to do our back. All right. Somebody says, pass on the blocks, pass in the ghetto. Yes, I've been doing that religiously for the past several months, and I continue to do it. Sometimes, a lot of the times, I don't publicize it. I don't like sometimes to just, well, for different reasons. But let me just assure you that that is very much part of what we have been engaged in. And it's something that I believe in deeply, and I've been encouraging our candidates to do the same thing. I believe that when you connect on a personal level with people, it is much easier for them to find a reason to vote for you. If they don't see you, if they don't know you, if they never seen or heard you, or you just even interacting with them, it is very easy for them to dismiss you when it comes to the poll. So I understand that. I understand that very, very much so. And it's something that we have been pushing very, very hard with our own candidates and with our caretakers, to do those visits, find out what people are going through, find out what the needs are. We may not be able to offer a lot of help now necessarily, but at least if we know what the needs are, we can do something in terms of planning. So now that I understand, for example, the way a large number of our people in these communities live, it is very easy now to begin to plan around it. How do you change that? And already some ideas are coming forward in terms of how communities like these, how you can, bring them back, and how you can change the dynamic on the ground. And so it's important to understand that and to know that, and that is exactly what we are doing, and it is really feeding into our planning for taking this country forward. So absolutely, the question of being on the block is definitely one. You need to be on the ground. Yes, absolutely. We just said that. And then we continue to do that. Breaking a man's legs and giving him a wheelchair is another comment that is coming through. And yes, so I just wanted to highlight this situation of Silver Lake and what is going on in our communities, and how we need, to really make that difference. And so that's why we are doing this. And that's why, we have this program. We have, we have, if you like, restricted or limited our connection on air, on the radio. We have only a 1 hour radio program, and this 1 hour. So we really have 2 hours in the week. And the main reason is that we want the other time, we want persons to be focused on doing the work on the ground, visiting the homes, finding out what is there, and just building that rapport with the average Dominican. And I can tell you, and I just want to say a big thank you, to the various communities that we've been, whether it's in La Plaine or in Delices or Silver Lake, Newtown, Soufriere, Scott Z, wherever it is that we've been, Paid Bush, any of those communities that we've visited, St. Joseph, I must say a big thank you, to the people. I have not experienced so far personally no hostilities, and that I think is very encouraging. Even where people are not supportive of the United Workers' Party, Team Dominica, I cannot say I've experienced any kind of hostility from our people. Dominicans are very decent people. And I believe that, the fact that we're willing to come out and talk to them, they're willing to listen. And that to me is very important, So irrespective of how you think the politics is, in terms of sometimes it can get nasty and violent, so, but I can tell you on a very personal basis, very personal level, it has been working out very well. And it has been my pleasure to meet people of all political leanings, and having those conversations along with the rest of my team. So is something that we are committed to doing. It's something that we are committed to not only doing, but even increasing the amount of time spent on the ground, trying to meet everyone, trying to meet every person that we can. It's a commitment that we've made, and it's something that we are trying our very best to keep up to. All right. So again, as we end this session, let me just say, or let me just express. All right. Let me get this final comment, and then I will move into the next segment. All right. And kind of let the people know that we can reduce the cost of food, and it can be reduced by simply increasing production and supply. When tomatoes are in season, the price is low. When the tomatoes are out of season, the price goes up. Let them know that United Workers Party will increase the supply of food by supporting the farmers. Absolutely. And yes, in fact, I'm going to come to that in just this segment, because I wanted to talk a little bit about the 10 pillars to shared prosperity, because part of what the 10 pillars aim to do is to really provide those opportunities that you speak about. And one way of doing this, of course, is lowering the costs to individuals. And we absolutely have to look, as a government, we must look at the tax regime in this country. Okay, what I mean by that, we have to revisit the VAT, we have to revisit the custom duties, we have to revisit the excises, the levies, all of those duties and taxes that are placed upon the people of Dominica. We absolutely have to review those. Already, we are seeing areas where we can make cuts. We are seeing areas where we can, whatever revenues we are going to give up through the lowering of some of those rates, we already seen how we can make up that revenue through, and one of the areas is through increased production. As you rightly mentioned, if you have increased production, if you have a larger agriculture output, it means you can export more. It means you have more to provide locally. Prices are going to come down. If people have to spend less on food, then it means they have more to spend on services, probably more to spend on health, more to spend on their children. All right, so all of these are very much interconnected, and that's the reason why, in planning, we have been discussing with the Dominican public this whole issue of the 10 pillars. And the tax regime is a very, very important one. And today I had a conversation with an individual, and it had to do with the minimum wage. Because, as you know, on the 3rd of June of this year, we proposed that a United Workers Party, Team Dominica, will increase the minimum wage to $12 an hour. And that was on the 3rd of July. Then we had Parliament met in 3rd of June, sorry. Parliament met in July. There was no mention in the budget of this fiscal year, no mention of a minimum wage increase. But suddenly we have been hearing about a minimum wage increase. And one wonders how you're going to do that in the absence of not having budgeted for it. And also we're not hearing about even a supplementary sitting for the passage of supplementary estimates. How is the government going to account for that? Because if you're going to raise the minimum wage, it means that, for example, the National Employment Program workers, the NEP workers, will be entitled to some kind of increase, and so the question is, how much is that increase that the government is proposing? We are very clear. We decided, Team Dominica, United Workers Party, Team Dominica decided that $12 is the wage, is what we call a living wage. That's the amount of money we believe that the average worker, even at the very lowest level, should have in order to be able to live, not necessarily comfortably, but at least to do better than they're doing now. So it will not be a constant struggle or constant grind. And that works out to roughly 2,000 EC dollars a month. All right. So that's not a whole lot of money given where the prices are. But in addition to that, we are looking to lower the prices or to reduce the prices. And the prices, and as Joel, I think it was mentioned, the fact that our prices of agricultural commodities are so high, one of the problems why it is so high is that we do not have the level of production that we should have. And it is very simple. The more you have of the produce, the lower the price goes. As it gets scarcer, as it gets less and less on the market, the price goes up. So there is what we call an inverse relationship between the amount of produce on the market and the price. So, for example, a few weeks ago, you could get an avocado because every vendor had avocados. It was in season. You could get an avocado for dollar 50, $2 because it was in abundant supply. Now there are some avocados of what we call off-season avocados. I looked at the price yesterday. There was one for $8. All right, and it's a simpler matter of now you do not have as much, so the price goes up. So there's that. Okay, as the quantities are reduced, the prices go up. So we have to do something about that, and the way you can cure that, part of the cure for that, is to have increased production. Right. So how are we going to increase production? We're going to increase production on the pillar of agriculture, one of our major pillars in our 10 pillar plan for Dominica. We're going to increase agriculture production. All right. That is going to be key because not only are we going to expand our export of produce to the neighboring countries, but we are also going to be developing our agro processing industry that will take in a substantial amount of those produce. So we want people to understand that we're going to tackle agriculture in a very significant way, in a very sustainable way that will provide opportunities for people to earn money. Even public servants can do extra, can have their gardens, can have their fields that they can plant produce. Police officers, fire officers, you can get all of those as extra monies that people will be able to earn once we develop the agriculture sector, because we believe that one of the very foundations of our economy is agriculture, and we'll be doing everything possible to develop that sector as part of the pillars and link that with a minimum wage of $12, and of course a complete redoing of our fiscal. Okay, now we are still putting the numbers together, so I cannot tell you exactly which taxes we are going to be proposing to be reduced and so on, and by how much. All of that is subject to computations, subject to calculations, because we have to look at the revenue loss on government, and for every dollar that we lose when those things come, you have to be able to have a plan in place to get it back. All right, so that takes time, the crunching numbers to do it, but rest assured that's part of the work that is ongoing to ensure that when we finally propose a package to the Dominican public, it is one that we can stand by, is one that we can guarantee, and is one that we know for a fact will work and will bring the kind of results that we are looking for. So in my discussion today with this individual, he was concerned about some of the family, the larger farmers, for example, those who hire workers, and part of the concern was whether or not that would not have a devastating impact on those farmers, and if they are to pay higher minimum wages, how is that going to impact the final price that they sell? Okay, so the key to this in any minimum, and I'm giving some free advice as well to the government. I think that they're struggling with this whole minimum wage issue, and they will not ask the experts, but I can give them some free advice nonetheless. The way you actually do it is that you structure your legislation. So you must have minimum wage legislation. It's not just about increasing the minimum wage. It's absolutely important to safeguard this, that you take this legislation to Parliament and you build in within that legislation. You can decide that there are certain sectors that you want to provide some kind of safeguards for, or if it is imposed on those sectors, it could have a devastating impact on the overall economy, and you want to deal with that in your legislation. So just a hint there to the government as you're doing this, make sure you in fact do the legislation and you look at those sectors, all right, so that you know exactly when you impose the minimum wage, know who is going to feel the pain how the pain is going to be eased, and what's the overall impact on the various sectors of the Dominican economy. So I just wanted to put this in there as an assurance to those who are concerned that a $12 minimum wage is going to have a devastating impact on everybody. That's not the case, okay? This thing will be deliberately planned, and in cases where, as I said, one of the things that we're looking at is providing some subsidies. So, for example, if for the small businesses, if there is an issue with those small businesses meeting these additional wages because they think that's going to impact on their own operations, there's a way that the government can actually work with those businesses and allow them to take tax breaks on the back end. So, for example, the corporation tax, if you can reduce the corporation tax or the income tax that they have to pay, and so on. So, there are different ways that you can mitigate or you can limit the impact of those wages, of those minimum wage increases on different segments of the economy. So, that is something that we are planning for deliberately. We are we are planning, to do it in a way that will not hurt the economy, but will benefit the economy. All right. So let me just take this question there from Wilmot Robin, who says, I just started, but to listen, I guess. What I heard you mentioned about lowering prices. Is that on everything or just essential goods? If so, how do you deal with the ratchet effect of prices? Okay. So let me answer this. The overall prices are very high. And so, for example, the prices of imported goods are extremely high in Dominica. Okay. So you have the prices of imported goods being extremely high, but also prices of agricultural products, what we produce in Dominica, these are also very high. So let me deal with the imported prices first. We in Dominica, we are kind of fortunate in the sense that we import a lot of our goods from the United States. We import a lot of goods from the United States, and traditionally, the US have had very low inflation because you will know, especially those of you who live in the United States, you will know that anytime inflation starts to get out of hand, they use the Fed rate, the interest rates to tackle inflation, to kind of keep prices down, keep prices within check. And if you look in Dominica, on average, prices have been rising by about 3% over the past few years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our inflation in Dominica is tied into the inflation process in the United States. Okay, so that explains why when in a low inflation environment in the US, we also have a similar situation in Dominica. But we do, even in that environment, we find that the price of goods are just extremely. I'll just give you one example, and I'm giving that one example just because today I saw it. All right, so you have those little pack of soaps, and for those of you in the US, you know that you pick those up at Walmart for probably $3, $4 maximum US dollars, and you get like, actually it's a lot less than that. It's not too, you get like $8 in that pack, or 8 soap in that pack, and you pay about, let's say, $3.50, $4. Now, I happen to see that same pack of soap in Dominica today, but not with 8, but with 6, and it costs $34. Okay, so if you do the math, that's almost $6 for one bar of soap. Okay, that's almost $6 for one bar of soap, when 6 could almost give you the price of the 8. But that is it. Now, why is it that this is so high here in Dominica? It is that high in Dominica because of our duties that are paid on that import. So the person who buys, but bear in mind, if you're buying retail, you buy it for, let's say, $4. The person buying in bulk to come sell in Dominica will probably get a discount, probably put it at $3. Okay, but when it comes into Dominica, he has to pay these extremely high custom duties. And also, you have to pay those duties, those fees, and it varies. You can pay up to 45%. And then you have tailgate fees. You have a number of different custom charges and duties. And if you spend one day over, you're charged on your produce and so on. So you have all of those different charges that, at the end of the day, the business person, not that they're stealing Dominicans, not that they're you know trying to force profits out of Dominicans, but they have to pay those duties to the government. All right, so that's where we're going to start. You must, if you're thinking very seriously of reducing the overall prices in Dominica, especially on imported goods, and I say on everything, including transportation, but I'm talking now of just essential, basic commodities. What the government has done is that they have imposed a very high rate of VAT, and they have exempted some items from that VAT. Okay, so I think milk and sugar and so on, a few items are VAT exempt. That is not a very good approach to the whole thing. It would have been a lot better if the rates were adjusted for all the commodities. Because I noticed even with that adjustment, some or that zero, sometimes the businesses don't even make that distinction. All right. So, in fact, there's something I need to check since the announcement by the government of those VAT exempt products. It would be good to see whether those prices have in fact come down as they should have, or if the business people continue to claim that they have old stock and they bought at the higher prices or they paid those higher prices. Okay, so there must be a way to tackle this, and that is where we'll be looking at. So, yes, the price of imported commodities are extremely high, and that can be tackled through the looking or the reviewing or the revising of the tax regime that we have in this country. Now, bear in mind, we are a responsible government. We understand that some 40% of government's recurrent spending, 40% of the total amount they spend comes from those taxes. So it means if you're going to adjust, lower, in some cases remove those rates and so on, that will have a significant impact on the revenues raised by government. So there must be an alternative plan to deal with this increased revenue. Now, one of the ways you can deal with that shortfall in revenues is to simply increase the volume. Okay, so instead of taking a high rate on low volumes, you can take a lower rate on much larger volumes. All right, because if people have more money to spend, if people are spending more freely, if people have better jobs, if you have an economy that is better organized, you will find that the goods that people are going to buy can be reduced, or the prices on the goods can be reduced. And I take St. Martin for an example. When you buy goods in St. Martin, it is hard to imagine that you're in a Caribbean country. I mean, the prices are just so ridiculously low compared to what we pay in Dominica. Even when you compare the prices that we pay here in Dominica, you compare that to what you pay even in our sister country, St. Lucia, it is sometimes a huge difference. So what that tells me is that it boils down to these just very, very high rates that exist within the country and that's imposed on Dominicans. And so we have to deal with that issue. So that is one in terms of the imported goods. In terms of the prices of agriculture products, I kind of talked about it just a little while ago, but I want to reiterate this. One of the ways you can deal with that almost immediately is to have increased production. So ginger is scarce, the price goes up all of a sudden. Passion fruit these days are very scarce. I'm told it's now like $5 a pound, or very, very, very high. Bananas, about a hand of bananas, probably like 6 bananas for $8 yesterday. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with the scarcity of those products here in Dominica. So Joel was right. It's very, very right in saying that the way you deal with this is to increase production. But how do you increase production in agriculture? You increase production in agriculture by offering incentives to farmers so that they want to go out there and produce. All right. And there must be a system of subsidies as well that will have to go to the farmers. So all of that, in terms of the inputs, in terms of what is required, in terms of the labor that goes into production and so on, all of those areas must be looked at and must be addressed if you're going to tackle that problem of high prices. So our focus in the 10 pillars is to ensure that we have a price level that is reasonable. And we're going to do it in such a way. Imagine when our prices become reasonable in Dominica, people are going to come to Dominica to shop, We're going to encourage people to come to shop in Dominica because our prices will be that attractive. Okay. So that is something that we're absolutely working on in terms of the planning that we are doing and we're putting forward. We must deal with that particular issue. All right. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the 10 pillars as we go on Real Talk. We'll keep giving you some of our ideas. We'll keep giving you some of the information that we want you to know about as to what we plan to do for this country. And the basis of this, as I said, is the 10 pillars. So minimum wage $12. We're waiting to hear. In a few weeks' time, the Prime Minister is promised that he's going to announce the minimum wage. So we're going to hear what level that is. That will be a very interesting time. And also, we're going to hear what kind of legislation he puts forward for the minimum wage legislation, who is going to be impacted, and all of those different questions we hope will be answered when the announcement is made in a few weeks' time. But at the end of the day, we absolutely want the best for Dominica. So any good measure we will support. Anything that is in the best interest of Dominica, we will support. But we will equally stand against everything that we believe is not in the best interest of our country. We'll stand equally firm and equally strong on that. All right. So just be assured that's the way we do it. That's how we operate. All right. I'm going to. All right. Before. Okay, let me get this one last comment there from Michael. He says, yes, addressing the labor shortage in agriculture and incorporating science and technology in agriculture to boost production for the year rather than having production seasonal for most of the crops. Okay, yes, so that is it. That's one of the issues that we have been hearing about in terms of the how do we deal with this labor shortage. Okay, how do we deal with that issue? And that is something that we have to do some thinking around. People are saying that it's hard to get the young people to get back into agriculture, but that is something that we have to tackle. Absolutely, there are different suggestions that have been unfolded in terms of how you address that particular problem. Sometimes price is a good incentive, if people know that they're making good money, that's a good incentive sometimes. But that is something, as I said, the experts are are working through this and thinking of the best way to do this. And let me just say a big thank you, to those who have offered suggestions to us as we sought to develop the 10 pillars, those who are continuing to provide suggestions, useful suggestions to us. At the end of the day, we want to ensure that whatever we present to the Dominican public is doable, it's workable, it can be operated on, and it can bring the results. Importantly, it can bring the results that we desire. All right. So a big thank you to this. Okay, let's get this other comment that says from Jean. He says Antigua is asking Guyana for agricultural products because we are unable to supply them enough produce and hoping to get them cheaper there. What a shame on our government. Yeah, that is very true. Just saw news reports that Antigua has reached an agreement with Guyana to bring exports. So even with the cost of shipping all the way from Guyana to Antigua is going to be cheaper for them than getting it from us here in Dominica. And that is something that we have to look to in terms of our competitiveness, in terms of how we do. But at the end of the day, my whole thing is, we can develop agriculture where if we put in the correct infrastructure for agro processing, we may not have much to export, our neighbors will have to look elsewhere, but I believe that, on the scale that we're thinking about, in terms of the kind of factories that we're hoping to put down, in terms of the kind of produce, the agriculture, so we're hoping to do the cocoa production, in terms of coffee production, in terms of citrus production, essential oils, and so on. When we think about all of those areas and the production that we want out of Dominica to process and to add value to, we may not have much to give out, but that is something that we have to continue to be mindful about, and to hope that we can get this done. All right, so let me just say a big thank you to all of you for your very encouraging interactions there, and and for taking the time out for and for taking the time out to comment. And as always, sometimes you'll get the negative comments. Someone says everything good for Dominica. You're protesting everything good for Dominica. I don't know if I'm protesting anything good for Dominica. I want everything good for Dominica. And certainly, whatever it is that we are planning is in the best interest of the country. All right, in a few minutes that we have left, let me look at the issue of the confirmation process. The time is going by rather quickly tonight. I mean, I'm not going to revisit this disastrous, to put it mildly, press conference of the Prime Minister. You expect some statesmanship. You expect the Prime Minister to address the public on the issues that are facing the country as the Prime Minister. We have a major problem with the confirmation process. It is not going according to plan. It is not working out because several thousands of persons who otherwise should be confirmed find that they're not able to get confirmed. And they're not able to get confirmed because the Electoral Commission, after having insisted that they will allow the use of the birth certificate along with a photo ID, allow that to be used to confirm individuals, are now saying that it is no longer needed. But by doing that, they have instantly excluded thousands of Dominicans from being able to confirm. So the process is not going well. In some cases, we are told where passports have been provided by the Labour Party to their supporters, we are told that some of these supporters are saying, thank you very much, bye-bye, Dominica, see you later. And so they're not even interested in confirming. So there is a real problem. And I would have hoped that the Prime Minister would have been more statesman in terms of, would have applied more statesmanship in terms of really tackling this problem. Yes, he did mention the fact that, like us, he is not happy with the fact that the birth certificate has been excluded. And so based on that, we are expecting the Electoral Commission now to go back to the drawing board and reintroduce birth certificate. But we also have more issues with it. Beyond this, we have a situation where it is posing a tremendous burden on the voters who need to confirm, in the sense that there are entire villages where there are no confirmation centers. So there's no confirmation center in Mon Prosper and in Warner. There are other villages that we are told are Solda. There are different villages across Dominica. There are no confirmation centers. You also have too few confirmation centers, for example, in the Roseau North constituency. That includes Pottersville, Goodwill, Fonkole, Gotha, Santa Roma, Yampis, and Stock Farm, Bellevue, all of those areas. You have only two confirmation centers, the largest voters block in the country. Two confirmation centers at the Red Cross building in Goodwill and the Fonkole Center. Now you have two, so that means individuals from Yampis, Parish Pete, Bellevue, Stock Farm, and all of those areas who want to confirm, they have to go all the way to Fonkole. They have to literally go out of the way. They have to find a way, pay a bus, most likely go down there to confirm. And they wonder why it is that the Electoral Commission doesn't make it easy as voting. That's how the confirmation process should be. With voting, we have voting centers throughout the island so that people vote within a few yards of where they live. why can't we do the same for the confirmation process? So, for example, instead of asking the whole of Trafalgar to leave Trafalgar, or sorry, the whole of Mont Prosper, I meant Mont Prosper, instead of allowing the whole of Mont Prosper to leave Mont Prosper and go to Trafalgar to register, why not make it easier? Why not set up a center, as was initially promised, a center in Mont Prosper? Why it is that the Electoral Commission announced a confirmation center for Mont Prosper, and in reality, they are not using that center. So we have a simple solution for this, where you have enrollment officers. So you have enrollment officers in Trafalgar, for example. Don't keep them in Trafalgar 7 or 5 days in the week. They can do 2 weeks in Trafalgar, a day or 2 days in Trafalgar, not one day there, another day there. Or they can do a week in Trafalgar, and the following week they move across to Mont Prosper. In that way, you can accommodate the people of those villages. It is not fair that the Electoral Commission is placing this undue cost, this undue burden on people to confirm. So the confirmation process is not working. So I was hoping that we'd have heard some very specific recommendations to solve these issues from the Prime Minister. Instead, he used the opportunity to spend time trying to pit me into this into a corner and trying to somehow corrupt the public's view of who I am and what I am and my integrity. But that does not work. I mean, the population understands the falsehoods of all of the statements that were made. They've listened to my words and so on. We never offered to have passports for any persons or to pay, because, as I said, thousands of people needing passports. Where are we going to get those resources? That's a lot of resources, approaching the millions of dollars. So how are we going to get millions of dollars to get passports for people? In fact, we suggested to the government of Dominica that they could do a passport amnesty for persons within a certain income bracket who do not have. It will be on a needs basis. I'm not saying everybody should get that, but do it in such a way, let the government absorb that cost. Okay, that for individuals who need, if you insist on having a passport, because that is your insistence, if you insist on them having passports, then do a passport amnesty for those who are in need, so that everybody has an equal chance of getting a passport. That is preferred to having the Labour Party claiming to have resources, and most of us believe that a lot of those resources come from the sale of our passports, that they have largesse that they can use because of the lack of accountability and transparency in that project, in that program. It allows us to think that a lot of those resources are coming from that program, that they can do that the rest of the population is left out. So the confirmation process needs fixing. It needs fixing now. The issue of registration, we heard a lame excuse from the electoral office that they had to stop the registration process because of some software that they. I mean, how long does it take? All you need is a form. Registration, all you need is a form that was in place already over all the years. So if you make an adjustment to that form, any computer program that you're using allows you to maintain the old system that you have. If you want to migrate to a new system, then you work on that in parallel. And in one day or over a weekend, you switch. So to tell the Dominican public that you need all of this money, because mark you, since as way back as March of this year, the Electoral Commission stopped registration. They only saw it fit to inform the Dominican public on Friday after the Prime Minister had spoken at the press conference. But that's not good enough. Article 17.1 calls for continuous registration. And that's what we must have, continuous registration. And so there must be a way of doing this. And we are asking, or I think we should even say we are demanding that the electoral office immediately revert to doing registration. Now, why is this important? This takes on added significance because when the question was posed to the Prime Minister in his press conference about whether or not he was going to call elections during the convention period, He made it very clear he's keeping his options open. And from the body language, it appeared to me, look from what he said, that he's planning on calling an election. But the legislation is very clear that if you're going to call an election, that the list that applies is the list of May 2025, basically the old bloated list, plus the persons who have registered since May. This must be included. So if you stop the registration in March, it means that there has not been a single new registration that will be added to this list. So already you have made this requirement immaterial. You have violated this requirement. And the question is, can an electoral commission survive an inquiry? Can an electoral commission survive a legal process that questions why it is when the legislation calls for voters to be those that are comprised of the old voters list, assuming, of course, that there is an election during the confirmation period, that you have to include those on the old voters list plus the new registration. If the new registrations is zero, what happens to the 17, 18-year-olds, those who are now eligible to vote? They would have been disenfranchised. They would not have been given a chance to exercise their democratic and their fundamental human right. And honestly don't see the Electoral Commission winning that argument in court. So we have some very serious issues there that must be dealt with. And it would have been so much easier for the Prime Minister to say, yes, let us respect the process of confirmation. Let us get it right. Let us do it speedily. Let us do it quickly. That's the reason why we wanted re-registration, because that could have been done within 3 months and the process would have been over. They chose the long and difficult way, but that's the way it is. But let us get it right. Let us get it right, okay? All right, we are out of time, believe it or not. Let me just say finally that we'll be having our town hall meeting this Friday at 5 o'clock at the PSU building. So for all of you in the Roseau area in particular, Goodwill, Tarish Pit, Cotta, all of these areas, descend on the PSU building at 5 o'clock on Friday. We will not keep you long. Between 5, we'll be done by 7. But we want to talk to you about the 10 pillars. We want to talk to you about this whole confirmation process and other pressing issues that we believe that you need to know. All right, so come show your support, express your support for Team Dominica, express your support for the United Workers' Party as we work hard to ensure that we win this next election. So come out in your numbers, okay? On Friday, we look forward to seeing you at the PSU building at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Spend a couple hours with us and you will not regret that. All right. So thank you very much. And a big thank you again to all of you who took the time to write and who took the time to send comments and so on. Let me see. Let me just read this final comment there. I've not read it previously, so I'm just reading it together with you. Friends, I tried my best to be a silent supporter of change in my homeland because I do not live in Dominica and I don't want to express comments on issues that do not personally affect my standard of living. I get it, things are not as harmonious as the broader population would like it to be economically for each individual. I am of the opinion, though, that the real issue negatively affecting Dominica is the lack of political education. That is, a politically uneducated public who continue to be led by there was, I guess, to be led by I guess the person either ran out of the comment, but I think you kind of get the drift. He's saying that there's a lack of political education. And I guess some of that discussion comes up because the question is like, how can people continue to support a government that's not working for them? And that is something I struggle with, quite frankly. I can tell you, as a leader of the United Workers' Party, I struggle with the fact that some Dominicans continue to support a government that has clearly not worked for them. And the question is why? Why do? And the individual is saying part of that has to do with a lack of political education, people not understanding the role of government, not understanding that when you put a government in place, is to work on and for your and on and for on your behalf and for you. And so I think that we have to do a lot more in that regard in terms of educating people. And that's why we have Real Talk. That's why we have that program. We want to just have this conversation with our people. That's why we go on the ground and talk to them. We just need to have this engagement continuously because we believe that the more people know, the more they find out, is the more likely they will make the right decisions. And part of making the right decision for your life, for your future, for your country, is to vote the right government in. And that's where we believe the United Workers' Party Team Dominica is the better choice for the people of Dominica. And that's why we want you to know what we're about, to understand your leaders, understand what we bring to the table. And as we appeal for your support, we know that you will join us in helping to build a better Dominica. You will join us in working hard, in working together to make sure that the people of Dominica enjoy a decent standard of living, that people are able to make wealth, that people are able to create wealth in this country, and we can mint our own millionaires out of Dominica. Why not? Why can't we mint our millionaires? Why can't we build a middle class that have what they need in life, you know? So we continue to appeal to you and to your good senses and to encourage you to give us this support. Take a second look at the United Workers' Party, Team Dominica, and give us this second look. All right. Let me just read this other comment there. Having had the international bodies involved in our electoral process, we should inform them of the new confirmation process, which is aimed at excluding many voters. I agree very much with you. In fact, we will be releasing a press release tomorrow that raises our concerns, and this press release will be made available to the international media and to the international bodies. We'll certainly make that available to them because we believe that the information must go out there and must reach everybody that is concerned about our election process here in Dominica. All right. All right. Yes, somebody says, I believe once we put enough money into agriculture, we'll be able to upset the prices that Ghana is giving to Antigua. That is true. Please remember there is no new registration taking place for 8 months now, which is against the law. That's correct. We addressed this issue as well. So a big thank you to all of you. Thank you for your comments and for keeping us on your list of what to do on a Monday night. We'll be with you next week with another edition of Real Talk. But until then, Dominica, have a wonderful night and join us for our weekly radio program on Thursday, Workers' Voice at 8 o'clock on Q95. And of course, on Friday, looking forward to seeing you on Friday at the PSU Center, 5 o'clock, as we host our 7th Town Hall meeting in Roseau Central constituency. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Bye-bye.